Prevention and Awareness Council. Ms. Schmelzer?
Okay, the board passed a proclamation saying that September was Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month, and that proclamation also talked about establishing a council. So I have put together a draft ordinance of what that council would look like, who would serve on that, and I'm just looking for some feedback. If the board is okay with it as written, we would send it forward for first reading. It does take an ordinance to actually establish the council.
I have no problems with it, from what I've read.
Would you like a motion, Mr. Chair?
Well, first, have you, I mean...
Move it forward.
Sure.
If that's appropriate. Okay, so I'll move that we establish a Curry Suicide Council.
I have a second.
Sooner the better.
I'll second that.
Further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold.
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Aye.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
All right.
Good work.
Next is 6D. This is the Dosha Suite Hall re-roofing project. And I understand we have our board chair from the fairgrounds here. If we could step up to the microphone, sir, answer any questions we may have. Basically, for the last week or so, since I was at their workshop as the liaison for the county, they provided us with a set of plans for us to look at and inspect. If you had any concerns or questions about it,
Did you study thoroughly on that?
I did actually.
Yeah, that's pretty technical. 4 pages.
But Mr. Shabante is here, and to answer any questions, and also maybe just kind of give a brief overview of the work to be done on those plans. And then we need to have those plans approved for this to move forward. Because of the time of year it already is, this will not get done now till spring. I believe the fair was hoping to have it done before the rains came, but due to some engineering delays in the plans, it had to be set back. So.
Yeah, so a little bit of history is we've been having leaks in Dosha Suite for quite some time now. There's been a number of attempts to try to locally get people within the county, contractors that can fix it and take care of it. And it's been a challenge due to the size of the project, and it's a big challenge to do that. So it came about where the city of Gold Beach has stepped up to help the fairgrounds and the event center, because they understand the importance of that facility to the county, the economics of it all. And we finally got some funding from them to help doing this. So with their help and assistance, and they've basically been pushing it through, is they use some engineers. That's why you see the big package stuff. This is an engineered package that was put together with the assistance with the city. It's going to come through the process where we go out, put it out to bid, so we'll do an RFB or an RFQ, depends on however we want to do this here. So it's the importance of getting it done, and that's where we're at right now to see it. So with the city, we've been working on it to get this done. It's here now. We did get some delays, but we had to go back and forth because we were trying to make sure we do this one time, do it right, and irregardless of any future projects, that roof will be just okay and it'll serve its purpose.
Are there any questions?
Yep.
Mr.
If I
Boyd?
may, Mr. Chair. The only thing I have is, once they start construction, a project that big, usually you'll have a project coordinator, or at least, I hate to use the word inspector, but to make sure that, I know this contractor comes with very high reputable, recommendations, but almost on a weekly basis, just to follow through and make sure that they are doing precisely as the plans say, because that's a huge, huge project. So are you aware of that? Or
We've already addressed that issue.
Okay.
What we're going to do is have our building inspector actually go over and inspect the project as it begins, and then a couple of times during the project to go back
Maybe
over
once a
and
week?
re-inspect it. Well, once it's opened up, you'll be able to pretty much see. They've already identified some dry rot areas underneath, some 2x that are going to, from the sub-roofing and all that, that's going to have to be repaired. But until they peel it back and find out exactly what additional damage there may be, I think they've already identified a beam that needs to be replaced from rust. So.
And part of the bid process is that's going to be included, that they're going to have an expectation of unforeseen problems. Being a contractor myself, sometimes as soon as you open something, like, oh, there it is. So that will be set in, as well as cleanup as well. So we're trying to do. So right now, what we're trying to do is approve the plans that's been engineered, so we can move forward with the process. And then when the RFB or RFQ, however it's put out there, will be approved again, and then we'll get that process going.
Built correct me if I'm wrong, built 1968? I had my first...
I was a little younger
dance
then,
there that
I'm
year.
not quite sure.
Did they have dances back then?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And I was very well behaved, I can
But
assure you.
it's been there a long time. It's served its purpose through generosity of the fair friends in the community. The Band-Aids have been holding for so long, and it's kind to go for the big approach.
So can I get a motion, please?
So move, Mr. Chair. We're just doing kind of a stage of the plans that we're approving today, correct? It's not the final plan?
Well, these are the final plans to
What I
approve
read
for the roof.
was a general one step forward to approving the final plans. I may have missed that. These are the final plans.
It's my understanding that this is the final, the engineering and planning part of it.
Okay, so my motion...
Everything's
Yeah,
pre-engineered.
they need to have this approval so they can put together the package, the bid package. And then we'll have the bid package with all the details as far as cost and precautions.
Well, thank you for coming today, Mr.
Sure.
Shabante. And that's on the assumption of be a spring start date. Is that what you're anticipating?
As soon as our last week of summer ends here, with all this beautiful weather, I would say it would be probably mid-spring.
So, Mr. Chair, I will send a motion to approve the plans as we've read for the repair of the Dosha Suite Hall roof. Thank you.
And I'll second that with the assumption that you have lots of buckets for this winter.
We have pails everywhere, yes.
Further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold,
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce,
Yes?
Chair Pash,
Aye.
motion carried unanimously.
Moving on to 6E, Mr. Barlin, Lost Creek Lake Project Mitigation. If you would step up, sir, in case we have any questions. This is to extend the contract for Steve Barlin and the Lost Creek Dam and the entire Rogue River that Mr. Barlin, along with myself, council, have been working on. And we entered into an agreement in April with Mr. Barlin to represent the county and provide consulting services to the county in regard to the work done on Lost Creek Lake and Dam mitigation project. And this order approving the contract, the order approving the contract, it limited the type of fish to be covered by the project, and the attached extends the contract and also covers all species of fish. Do you have any comments, Mr. Barlin?
Yes, the Steve Byron, Gold Beach. The Lost Creek Dam has had effect on all species of wildlife within the Rogue River. And the Corps of Engineers was supposed to mitigate for any impacts of the dam. We've been moving forward at a pretty rapid rate. It's been picking up steam. A lot of partners we've been talking to. We had just attended the Fish and Wildlife Commission hearing here in Gold Beach, which is rare for them to come to Gold Beach, but they did, and it was well attended. There wasn't much information I give there, but the behind the scenes talking to the head of fisheries for ODF&W, who gave a nod to the direction we were going. We'll have to continue talks with him after he gets a chance to study it. You can't just hit somebody, without them being able to absorb it. But his view is the Corps of Engineers is extremely hard to work with, and they will not do anything unless forced to do. And so he's happy that somebody is stepping up to help them in that battle. And I'll be speaking with him hopefully this week. It's one of those things. He's in and out. It's going to be when we can get together. But to answer his questions from the documentation I gave him, I feel it's pretty imperative to be able to address all the issues of the dam and Rogue River restoration as we're speaking, and I'd kind of like to have that authority through the county.
Commissioner Gold?
You mentioned just a few minutes ago that all wildlife was affected. Did you mean just the fish or all wildlife?
Well, where I was going with that is the bugs. Fish eat bugs, you know.
Oh, okay.
And the bugs were impacted, you know. Anytime you build a dam, it changes the morphology of the river, you know, and the type of feed that those bugs feed on to exist, and that is a problem, but it's not recognized by ODFW or anybody. But I do have a 1994 study from probably the top entomologist ever to work in the state of Oregon that said at that time that the types of moss or growth that's on the bottom that the little bugs eat disappears with the dam, and bigger weeds basically can come in and have started growing in the river, you know, which feed larger insects. So you still have abundance of insects, but in larger size. But the insects for the little guys, when they hatch, are a lot rarer, you know, and so therefore they don't survive as well.
And that's what the fish eat, I take it?
Yeah, the
Okay.
little fish.
Thank you. I'm not a fisherman, so.
I would just like to make a comment to the public and let them know that Mr. Byerlin has done unbelievable amount of research and work on this. I mean, I would literally say over the years, thousands of hours, hundreds of meetings, and to watch him and Council Huddle to prepare for this. I just want to let everyone know that there's a lot going on with this. This affects every part of the economic development of this county. It affects not only the fishing, but it affects the businesses because we're not filling hotel rooms. We're not selling food in restaurants. Our guides have suffered. There's a lot that's going on with a lot of what Mr. Byerlin has brought forward here. And I just want to say, sir, kudos to you for the work, and I commend you for the amount of research that you've done, because some of the documents this man has found, there was only one document in the country that they could find, and he found it. So just to let you know the amount of research that's been done here, and I fully commend you, sir. So
Could I make another comment?
Sure.
The outreach, I mean, how far this reaches out. There's 7 mitigation hatcheries the Corps runs in the state of Oregon. You know, every time the Corps builds a dam, there is usually mitigation for them. The strongest mitigation agreement in the United States is the one on the Rogue River. You know, first one written where a dam was built for fisheries. You know, and they promised fisheries would improve. You know, and fish would benefit. You know, and that's not been the case. And they have not sought to do anything when fisheries decline, you know, to fix it. You know, so we're going to be looking into that. But this action, or, you know, thing that we're tackling here, you know, we have lots of information. We're in good shape. Council Huddle's been doing a wonderful job of putting things together. But it extends way beyond Curry County. You know.
Commissioner Boyce.
Thank you. Visited yesterday together with David Brock-Smith and Senator Dallas Hurd. And so naturally the House Bill 2379 bill came up. And I'm happy, I didn't get a chance to call you yesterday, but I'm very happy to report they have every intention of working and pushing, because the more they look at that. Now there may need to be some slight amendments, you know, as far as the county, Rogue Basin County participation. But even though we have a short session coming up, they think it is so legitimate to, as you just said, all of Southwest Oregon, not just Curry County. And I want to add to that real quick. I'm going to keep asking Jackson County to participate, and I think between us we can encourage them to do that. The only other thing I have at this time is he mentioned what kind of ologist there a minute ago. I missed that.
Entomologist.
I couldn't hear you.
What kind of ologist did you mention?
Entomologist.
Okay, I got it.
Commissioner Gold.
Just a couple of questions. I know this dam was put in many years ago. Have there ever been any complaints up to this point about the lack of the Corps of Engineers and the ODFW keeping their promises?
Certainly, you know, and
But basically nothing's happened.
I've done it for many decades, you know. It's like I explained to ODFW in front of the commission, you know, is ODFW is between a rock and a hard place, you know, and ODFW a lot of times when it comes to political or action, or they have to have support, you know, and to do it. So they're not carrying the whole load. You know, somebody's got to spearhead it. You know, they're not going to. They're not in a position they can. Just by their bylaws and, you know, the laws say that they can't do certain things, you know, and they can't lobby, you know, they can't
Right.
do a lot of things going forward. But we can, and Senate Bill 2379, or House Bill 2379, what that is, if people don't know, is that basically seeks for the legislature to supporting our action.
Okay.
And so, I
Council
lost
Love?
track of my mind here. So.
It's okay. The way you asked your question, Commissioner Gold, was if there's a record of any complaints about the Corps and ODF and W. Actually, I think there's records of complaints of ODF and W criticizing the Corps and nothing happening. So again, the record on this is vast. It goes back decades. We're trying to basically take the record and turn it into something that's understandable, pull out the important parts and present those to decision makers. So, but there's a whole bunch to it. Probably, if you have any questions, come talk to me or Steve.
Okay, I won't, yeah, I just
Working
think
within
the public needs to know that this is an ongoing problem, not just,
working within the economics of ODF&W, they have hatcheries around the state. There's only a few state hatcheries anymore. They've all been closed. So these large hatcheries that are attached to these mitigation projects like Lost Creek, you know, they not only raise the salmon and steelhead mitigation and trout, you know, but they also raise trout for all the lakes, Diamond Lake, Fish Lake, you know, Howard Prairie, you know, all of the lakes that people recreate at. Now, if the ODF&W was to lose being the contractors running those mitigation hatcheries, all of that trout production goes away. They're removed from the property, you know. And if that goes away, that shuts down the trout population, trout stocking of most of the state, you know. And so the ODF&W is very careful on how they step on the Corps' toes, you know, and they have to have something solid moving forward. You know,
so what you're saying is we're in a better position to step on their toes than ODF and W?
Exactly.
Mr.
Okay.
Barlin, if you would comment about the hatchery, the complaints that have been made about the hatchery over the years and no one believed, and then finally when you brought this, what happened?
Well, what happened is that there was reports of the number of fish that swam in the hatchery collection pond, you know, and that's what ODF&W put forward as the amount of fish that came back, you know. Well, wild fish swim into the ponds, and also jacks were not included in the spring chinook adults that were supposed to return. So they never backed those out. So the numbers of fish coming into the hatchery collection pond looked like it was much better than it was, you know. But the legal document says it's 13,020 adult spring chinook returning the hatchery. In the last 4 years, they've averaged about 3,000.
But the damages that were at the hatchery as well.
Yeah, there was, we came to Curry County with a letter no confidence and talked to you about that. That was our first step. Then we went to Josephine County, and why we were at Josephine County, because of the meeting here at Curry County, and we're attending Josephine County, before we had the meeting, the Corps of Engineers flew a task force of people to Lost Creek Hatchery. And they showed up, and they were at Lost Creek Hatchery while we were in the meeting at Josephine County, you know. And they walked around and found a whole list of problems with the hatchery that needed to be fixed. I believe they wrote a check for $5 million on the spot to fix those emergency repairs. The hatchery needs to be modernized. And 4 years ago, ODF&W told the Corps of Engineers that the water intake system is purified by filters going into the egg incubation and whatnot was polluted and needed to be fixed 4 years ago. Today, it's still not fixed. The hatchery staff actually took in on their own, because they just started taking eggs for this year. On their own, they went in and ran white PCV pipe around the filter system so they could get water that wasn't going in there. And it's interesting to see that the valves they took off of the filter system, the old filter system, the valve sits high in the system, and it was full of gunk and mold halfway across the valve, which means everything below that was gunk and mold, you know. And so they just piped around it. The Corps of Engineers has said, well, we're studying it, see if we get funding, blah, blah, you know.
And I think they lost about a third of their smolt.
They lost over 1 million smolt or eggs, this year. And this is another year they won't have enough to release,
So it sounds like there's been a little bit of fudging going around, huh?
Well, there's an interesting statement that come from on the hatchery mitigation programs for all of the mitigation for the state from ODF and W. It's a paragraph, and it basically says the Corps is, will not work with them, and basically the Corps says that take what we give you and sit down and shut up.
Okay.
So do I have a motion, please?
Chair.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yes,
Commissioner.
thank you. Coal Rivers Fish Hatchery, and that was completed in should I move my mic?
Yeah, you're kind of quiet.
My tie's slippery. When it was completed in 1977, this end of the state was so proud of what that offered and the importance of the entire project. I want you to mention again, if you wouldn't mind, to the citizens so that they can understand the impact of what you said about the seven, and you explained this to me a couple of years ago, I think, but the seven major dams in the state of Oregon, the strictness, the requirements, the guidelines on Coal Rivers Fish Hatchery. Number one, I think you said. So I want that kind of to sink in, how important that is, and the leverage I believe it should give us and give certainly at the legislative process. And so do you want to speak just a little more on that, make sure I'm repeating it correctly?
On Lost Creek, it's an interesting process because it started in 1935, and then during the war it was shut down to talk about it. But in 1955, flood came along, and it wiped out a lot of homes and a lot of damage. And when they did that, in 56, they started going on the dam again. Had a big meeting in Grants Pass, 400 people attended, And at that meeting, it was decided that they would move forward with the project, but no flood control project was acceptable that harmed fisheries. So it was basically a no harm thing. And that followed every document through until the project was completed. The dam has two equal rights that are at the top, two priorities. One is flood control and the other one's fisheries. Flood control is in the winter, fisheries in the summer and the rest of the time. It's the only dam that I know of that has the majority of the water rights from the dam is to fisheries. Can't be used for irrigation or municipal or whatever. And so we have all of the data and the legal parts of it. A regular dam, fisheries might have been down the list number 10 or so, or recreation or whatever, But Lost Creek, it's at the top, And so when the Corps looks at the dam and the operation, it should say, okay, what's it doing for flood control? Oh, it's working fine. It's doing good for us, What's it doing for fisheries? They're not looking at that. They're not paying attention. And they did not even have the documentation that told them how to manage the dam until we sent it to them. They emailed me and asked for it.
That amazes me as well, that, they don't even have their own documentation. You had to send it to them, so.
But they've had time now to read that documentation, and I've had no contact back from them, But where we're going, I'm kind of leap here just a little bit. Where we're want to go here is Council Huddle and Commissioner Pash, and I've talked to Commissioner Boyce, is we're going to hopefully, once we get kind of our ducks in a row here, when we're moving down that road pretty quickly, is to call a round table. And it needs to be a public meeting where all county commissioners can attend, and we'll have Jackson, Josephine, and Curry County, and any commissioner who wants to attend can, there'll be a public audience, it should be televised, and we'll invite the Corps engineers, staff, ODF and W, and any pertinent people that want to sit on the task force and the board to be able to talk. Public, in my view, would have the ability to make some comment, but basically it'd be between the panel that's there,
Commissioner Boyce?
I'm ready to make a motion when you're ready, Mr. Chair.
I think we're ready.
Move that we accept and approve this contract extension of the project mitigation for the Lost Creek Reservoir. It's an honor to make that motion, sir.
I'll second that.
Further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold,
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Yes.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
Next, we have F is special districts requesting contribution, Chetco Library District. And I have a public comment here from Richard Thode. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. I'm Richard Thode, Gold Beach. Before I start, This morning, I would like to commend Commissioner Boyce, excuse me, for spending his own time to pilot the jet boat up the river without too many concerns of the veterans not being able to make it back. Excellent job. But to spend your own time and effort to do this.
I heard three were missing.
To spend your own time and effort to do this is, for the veterans
Thank
of
you.
this county, is commendable, and I, as a veteran, appreciate it.
One of the biggest honors I've ever had.
I'm here today as a taxpayer, a veteran, and a member of Curry County Budget Committee. During this year's budget meetings, I noticed that we have 48 special tax districts that the county is charged with collecting and passing on the funds. The county has no way to pass on the cost of doing so, and this cost is shared by all county residents. The loss of SRS funds will undoubtedly create more future financial hardships for the county. We have all had issues with day-to-day expenses, especially the veterans in this county trying to get consistent health care. I'm here today not to criticize the two special districts I've read at this point, but merely wish out to point some inequities. I feel I should open the dialogue with the county commissioners and the general public in an effort to make the county more financially solvent in the future and still maintain the quality and quantity of service our county residents expect to receive. I do not have any specific ideas on how to solve this, but I do know I looked at two districts. One was Southwestern Oregon Community College, has a tax base of 0.7017 for $2,137,803 in 2018-2019. The Chetco Public Library was established, the tax rate was established in 1990 for future building, maintaining the operation of the library. The tax rate was 0.4256 on a tax base of $286,000. In 2018-2019, the county tax roll indicated they received $786,271.13. Basically, they have a current projected reserve fund of over $2.6 million. And I think I want to make sure that I am not here directing my research or comments in any way being derogatory toward the library and the board. In closing, I would just say I think libraries are very much important to the communities, but the taxing district issue has to be looked at in the future further. So,
Thank you, sir. And I would invite the library, Chetco Library, because we are specifically speaking of or about this issue. If you would like to come up to the podium, I welcome you to. If you'd just like to sit there, that would be fine as well. I'd just like to make it clear as well, and thank you for your comments, Mr. Thode. As I so appreciated the library board hearing, myself and Ms. Schmelzer went there last week, and we appreciated your time to hear what I had asked. And again, I want to reiterate, we're not here as an adversary. We are here as I guess part of our job is to look at the finances of the county and how, I don't want to say how they're best spent, but how best to manage them. I haven't had a chance because we have to in public meetings do this, so I guess we'll air some of this out to the other commissioners now, but during our meeting we did go through some of the line items in your filings with the county, and yes, there is well in excess of 7 figures in your cash reserves in the bank. I guess some of the biggest problems for me in this is this district was created, and I think wisely so, as I believe all the districts were created when they were created initially. They were created for a reason, and there was a good reason for doing that, or the voters wouldn't have voted for them. I think as time goes on, though, things change, and I think we need to be ready and willing to make those changes. The area in Brookings Harbor has grown immensely over the rest of rural Curry County. So the district dollars that you receive have grown at a far greater rate than the district dollars or the taxing based dollars that Curry County receives. So it's because it's become so much more populated. So I think if we were back in 1991 and the people that wrote this in 1991 could have seen how that growth happened, they might have had foresight to maybe say, if this happens in 20 years or 30 years, perhaps we could do this. So this is the kind of language that, I'm looking for and hopes that the library board would consider as I would our board of commissioners to look at some of the districts and how much money they receive, and possibly either doing a reduced rate for a period of time, or as Ms. Schmelzer has looked into, along with county council, how we can either reduce a district down and or a district can make a donation back to the general fund of the county. Like has been talked about broadly in these meetings, SWAC receives 2.1 million and change. This county receives, the entire county receives 1.8 million. Something's wrong there. The amount of services we receive, a college district that basically graduated, I want to say 30 students last year, and a lot of those were not full degrees, they were partial degrees, gets more money than the entire county to pay our bills. It's just not right. And again, I'm not picking on the library district. Please don't take it that way. But I am hopeful that you will see that. I believe if the four writers of this district could see the growth that was going to come into Brookings, and as I would hope your board would see, that there could be some donation given back to the county and or a reduction in the district. I've been told we should raise taxes, and that's been bantered around in the county for years and years. If we doubled our taxes, we couldn't still meet, the county could not meet its current debt because of the way that the county is structured. I believe that this board has been very frugal in its spending. We've had a few emergencies this year that we had to take care of that were, I believe, in my opinion, were neglected in past years. But again, when you look at a county trying to run the entire fund of this county on 1.8 million, and a school district, or I'm sorry, a college district as SWAC gets over $2 million. And again, I'm not picking on you, but a library gets $786,000. So you get almost half of, a library gets almost half, what is it, 38% of what the entire general fund of the county gets. And I just hope that the library board can see that. I don't want to say it raises red flags, but it raises pause for concern. And I guess for right now, I'll stop there and let the other commissioners have comment. Commissioner Gold?
John, do we have the speaker go first, maybe?
I'm okay hearing their comments, so I can then maybe respond to them, if that's okay. Yeah.
I've got quite a few comments, actually, because when I saw this, I was rather surprised. I was concerned that it had not been brought to the board before contacting the library. I'll give you copies of my comments. So that was my first concern. Number two, I'm really not sure it's legal. The district boards have a fiduciary responsibility to voters in that district to make sure their funds are spent in a way that the voters intended when the districts were formed. 3, funds going to special districts should be dedicated for that district and its function. Okay, I looked online, and online Josephine County formed a library district in 2017. And I'm just going to quote a couple of things because I think it's kind of apropos for this library district. The first quote said, "A library district is an independent public entity, independent of county government. All library taxes will go only to the library for the library services, not to county government." B, having a library district instead of a levy ensures that the taxes collected go to the library district to be used only for libraries rather than other county business. In addition, as a district, the libraries are administered by the Library District Board rather than the county commissioners. Okay, so really, as I see it, your funds, the library funds, come from two sources. First, bequests from individuals that were meant for the library and its functions. I personally know of one individual that donated close to $1 million. And the only reason I know that is because I was the chair of an entity that was a recipient of about that same amount at that time. I won't even name the source. But I also know that a number of people, when they die, bequest big sums to the library. Is that true?
That happens occasionally. I don't know in the recent history of that happening with Chetco for a large donation, or very large donation.
Okay.
Maybe a couple of times, but not
Okay,
huge
the donation
bequests.
I'm referring to was probably about 10, 15 years
Yeah,
ago.
maybe. I don't know
Yeah.
about it then.
Okay, also another source of your income is property tax that was approved by the voters to fund the library and not the county. 6, the way to lower the amount of property tax that the library district has is to, 1, the library board could put a ballot measure on to lower that tax rate permanently, or 2, the voters, if they're unhappy with what's going on, they could put forth a referendum and thereby put it on the ballot, and then the voters decide on lowering that tax rate. Then the county, if your tax rate were lowered, that doesn't guarantee that the county is going to get that money. The only way the county can get money is by putting forth a ballot measure to increase the property tax rate, maybe getting tax assessments caught up. That would be helpful. Getting bequests from individuals. I haven't heard of that happening. Increasing fees. Other types of taxes are put forth for the voters to approve, and possibly further economic development. That's how I see it. And I'm really not in favor of going around to special districts asking for contributions simply because those districts were formed and they get money that should be dedicated for the purposes that those districts were formed for. So that's my statement.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I don't have a formal statement prepared, so let me just say, before I say anything else, that I don't speak for the library board.
Could you identify yourself?
Sure. Julie Rutherford. I'm the director of the Chetco Community Public Library District. So I'm not speaking for the board. I'm kind of speaking, having thought about it, but not having prepared anything. So I completely appreciate the county's financial position. As a member of the community and as a member of a district that exists to serve this community, I would love for the library to help. But I do agree with Sue, and that I'm not sure about the legality of us giving money to the county. I have specifically spoken to Special Districts Association of Oregon, to our legal counsel, to attorneys at SDAO, to the Oregon Library Association's legislative body, and various other entities and other library districts that have been through similar things. And the consensus is that we cannot take money that was dedicated to us by our taxpayers and give it to another entity. It doesn't matter what that entity is. And so as the director, and again, I'm not speaking for the board, I know that they want to have a formal request from the board, the entire commissioners, before they have a formal response. But I'm not in favor of it, just because I think our allegiance is to the taxpayers and how they wanted us to use those funds.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No,
No, okay. Well, I'll just say that I do think I recognize that we get a lot of money. We get a decent amount of money from the taxpayers, and a well-funded library is something for a community to be very proud of, and we can do very great things. And the Brookings Library is frequently referred to as a gem of our community, and I think that's accurate. We provide a lot of services and ongoing programs and education and for all age groups. So I know you guys know the value of libraries, but I do just want to defend that. We use the funds well. And in particular with the reserve fund, that is a fund that has been specifically created and built up as a library improvement fund. That is specifically designated and can only be used for library and facilities. And we have ongoing upcoming projects. That is not just free-floating money that we're waiting for a rainy day to use. We have a 26-year-old building that has never had any major work done to it. So we have carpet and roofs and parking lots and sidewalks, and we don't have enough meeting space, so we're looking at adding on to our building, and there's constant things that we're looking at how we can better serve the community through those funds. So I just want to say that I appreciate the need for funds coming from this community. I just don't think that approaching special districts is the appropriate way to do so.
Council, could you comment on, have you done research on the, if it's a legal issue or not, as to being able to take money from a district and give it to the county?
Just very, very general. And the general principles are, I think, agreed to by what you're saying. Your district has assessed its taxpayers to carry out functions that are identified. That being said, if there's a benefit, to the functions that you're identifying by an exchange or a donation of funds to the county that will fulfill or further the goals of the district, that to me would be legal. And then there's a statute, Chapter 190 ORS, it's about intergovernmental agreements, which again in broad terms says that any two governments can get together and agree to perform the functions that any one of them can function alone. So really, it really matters what the details are. So when you said your board is waiting to just hear a specific proposal, I think in general it's not illegal in general, but it would just depend on the details of the specific proposal.
Yeah, we're never opposed to partnerships, and to if there is an appropriate way for us to have an intergovernmental agreement, if the funds that we are contributing to that are appropriate to library services. I think that is where our sticking point is. My sticking point. Again, I'm saying our, but I don't want to speak for the board.
Ms. Schmelzer?
One thing that I think the public doesn't understand when it comes to how the county interacts with the districts is you have an assessment team, the county assessor's office, who goes out and assesses properties, and you have the tax collector who collects those taxes, and you have a treasurer who, records money and does the deposits, etc. And they don't charge the districts. So it keeps costing the county money to help the districts, but they get nothing back for the services they're giving the districts. So,
Requirement.
pardon me?
Just the
Yeah, it's just a requirement that we provide that as a service, which we're not objecting to. But we are sitting here saying, how do we pay? How do we pay for these services that we're giving the districts? And is there a way we can get some of that money back so we can continue to function? We're so far behind on our assessments. We don't have the staff in there to do the proper assessments right now. So we're sitting there saying, how do we fund these staff people that can help the districts, that can help the community? And it's like a vicious cycle that we're stuck in the middle on, and it's how do we fund for how do we account for that? How do we pay for that? So we're just trying to uncover
Sure,
every
and I don't know
stone.
the ins and outs of all of that, but I believe that there is a way to charge for those services, that there might be a cap on how much you can charge, but if that's an avenue for you guys to pursue, that's fine. That then, if you're allowed to and can charge us a certain amount, then that's a different conversation for county services.
Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You showed a lot of courage on this program. Part of our job, and you articulated it very well, is to search and search to see how we can hold the county together. Yes, that sounds desperate. That's not what I mean, but we know what we're up against here. in kind of the general and the broad view of our county and the diversity, if you go from Langless down to Harbor, it's pretty amazing, the contrast. Brookings is, thank goodness, incredibly healthy. If I had my way, I would be spending time on natural resource issues 100% of the time. I've said, and I think you've heard me repeat, you could build the county back without too much growth on Curry General Hospital, certainly South Coast Lumber, BC Fisheries, Port of Port Orford, tourism. Who am I leaving out here? The point is this, coming back to natural resources, we have to help South Coast Lumber find green trees. They're in a serious competitive market throughout the Northwest, even the Western United States. And I think they're incredibly well managed and, in fact, are quite healthy right now. But just a worst case scenario, and I'm not anticipating this or projecting under any circumstances, but just for example, if South Coast Lumber closed their doors, there would be no need for a road department. There would be no need for a library. I know that sounds drastic. Fred Meyer would close their doors because people would move out. As you know, directly, South Coast Lumber employs 500 people. Where I'm going with this is that we have to have that long-term vision. We have to look and say, okay, I'm not necessarily agreeing with Commissioner Gold or you or the process, but I respect and appreciate that you took the time and then what you contributed there. And oh my goodness, yes, when you start talking about the legalities, the hardest part of my job has been to try and move our legislation forward, and yet there's always a reason why it can't be done. And the blocks, the roadblocks, the fences, the bureaucracy at all levels, city, county, state, federal. So I'll just, Mr. Chair, thank you for the time. I'll just conclude with this. We have to look at everything, and I'm proud of the library. Yes, you need a new parking lot, and you need a bigger, when DeFazio was there a month ago, I mean, you had to walk a quarter mile, which is a good thing. And we have Jeremy Skinner here from Curry Public Library. We need to recognize him, if you indulge me, Mr. Chair, Librarian of the Year, so we're going to support you for that in the next 2 years.
Okay,
Thank you. So yes, we just have to look everywhere we possibly can.
Commissioner Gold?
I just had one other comment. There was put forth by the legislature a bill that would charge the district a certain percentage, the districts a certain percentage for administrative fees. I think that bill died, but I think that would be an important thing to support. So that would be the right avenue to go.
Commissioner Boyce?
Mr. Chair, thank you. Travel in this issue as a county, I spent some of my own money to get to Salem to testify for that bill to benefit our assessor and the issues and the requirements and the roadblocks, the responsibilities of counties that you just communicated there. And of course, travel was an issue back in those days, and so that's why we have to be in Salem, and that door is still open, but it's going to require one of the three of us to make a concerted effort to get there and testify before these different committees. And we'll be benefiting all rural counties if we can possibly get that bill through. And I think it was collecting 2%, maybe it's 1.5% from all the taxing districts, which would be a large sum of money. Thank you for being up on that potential. That's all I have now.
Again, I just want to reiterate that I'm not here as an adversary. We are trying to look at everything in this county and how we can either reduce, consolidate, or put our money at best to work for us. So that was my whole reason for coming to see your board last week. This board was fully aware that I was planning to do that, as it has been aware that that this commissioner has been looking into all the special districts for several months, and it has been a large part of my weekly schedule. So I thank you for coming to the meeting, and at this point, I don't think we are ready to make a formal offer. I think this is the beginning stages, but I did want to make sure that the board understood what took place in the meeting and what we spoke to your board about, and then perhaps we can maybe plan a workshop here in the near future with the board to discuss this further, as we are going to be discussing all the special districts in the county. I just want to show one thing real quick, and it's very hard to see because it's not color, but this is the pie chart for the county. And again, everybody says, well, raise property taxes. Well, Curry County gets 6.52%. So for every dollar we raise, we get 6 cents, 6.5 cents.
Outside
It's
the district.
$1,800,000 this county gets for everything other than the districts. So I think it's imperative that this county look at all the districts, this board look at all the districts, and have meetings with all of them and make some clear decisions to inform the public. And then we will let the public decide how they would like to best approach that, because at that point, it's out of our hands. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, did you have something else?
No, that's okay. Actually, if you're going to have a workshop, then I think my question and comment would be more appropriate during that time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I will be going on with special districts in our next agenda item, but we need to take a 10-minute recess, so we will reconvene at 10:15. Back in, it is 10:17 on September 18th, 2019. Next on the agenda will be G, special districts, when there is no quorum. Ms. Schmelzer.
Okay, we have, as you heard, we have about 4 dozen districts, and we recently had a case where we don't have enough members for the district board. So we were asked to actually advertise to 4 members for that board. In my research, and council can correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a section in the statutes that allows for the dissolution of a district if the district at the time of a regular district election has not elected district board members. So the conversation I want to have with the board is, when we don't have sufficient members to fill a board, do we want to continue to extend county resources advertising these positions and doing appointments, or do we want to choose to, if we have the ability to dissolve the districts at that time, to dissolve the district?
Commissioner Gold?
The question I would have would be is we would have to probably advertise to that district that we're thinking of doing this and giving them sufficient time to get a board together. And if they don't do so, then I would think that we could go ahead and dissolve it. But we would have to give sufficient time for that district, whatever it is, to get their act together, so to speak.
You know, I think that's a legal question. I know the way I read the statutes, it doesn't say that. I mean, I'm sure we'd want to give a notice that we're doing it.
Oh, exactly.
But
What statute are you reading?
You knew he was going to ask that.
Yeah, 198.920.
I think, again, this is getting back to our conversation a while ago. It's time for this board to reassess the way the county districts are set up. If we can consolidate some districts, if there are some districts that are no longer needed, we can remove those districts. If we can look at the tax rate and benefit for each district, is it truly a benefit and a need for that district? These are answers that the public will have to give to this board through a vote, probably, on a lot of it. But it's time that we address the issues and bring them out. Let's talk about them, because I would venture to say that 90% of our public in this county doesn't know how the districts operate in this county, how much money they get, and how they spend their money. And I think it's time that we at least bring this out again and look at it, so that we can make sure that our dollars are best spent. We had, until a few months ago, we had a sheriff's department that the criminals in South County knew wasn't on the road between midnight and 6 a.m., so they could do whatever they want to do. I just can't imagine those kind of security issues for this county, and some of the shortfalls that we face, like Director Schmelzer was just saying. We can't even get
Are you mic'd?
It fell off.
Gotcha.
I had it. It fell off. I got a slippery tire like you. We can't even get our assessments up to date because our assessor's office is on bare bones. Our planning department, I mean, until the last few months, so much of our county services that we are mandated, well, not mandated, but we're supposed to perform, haven't been performed because of loss of revenue for the county. We've had to strip it to bare bones. And we're finally trying to get those things back in motion again. And in order to fund it, like I said before, things change. And I'm sure when these districts were formed, there was good intent and there were viable reasons for doing it. But things have changed, and I just think it's time that the board relooks at all of this and at least gets it out as information to the public so that the public can make a decision. Commissioner Gold?
I think I'm going to reiterate that I think it's important that we go through the right process. The public does need to be educated, and then it's up to the public to determine whether or not they want those districts. There are ways to get rid of those districts, number one. Number two, there are ways to lower the tax rates. But bottom line, the only way the county can get money is to go to the voters and put a ballot measure on there, and they have to determine whether the tax rate is increased by the county or for the county.
I guess my point for putting it on the agenda is just to have that general discussion. If they don't, I don't want to say don't care, but if the people in that district don't vote or have people on their board, the county then is begging people to come and serve on that board. Why not just dissolve it? If they don't care enough to have people on that board or elect people to that board, why are we pushing to make sure those boards are full? If we have the ability to dissolve a district when they don't have a board, should we exercise that right?
And the ORSs are very clear on that, excuse me, Commissioner, but the ORSs are very clear on that, the dissolution process for districts and consolidation is very clear. So, these are things, again, I agree with you. I don't think that we should be having to bang on people's doors. You asked for the district to be formed, it was formed, the voters formed it. Again, maybe the district is no longer necessary, or you don't care enough about that district anymore to put a board in place or management in place to run that board, then let's dissolve the district. Why waste the taxpayers' money and the county's money and time to keep that district open? Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thought I heard you say, though, dissolve the district. You mean dissolve the board?
Dissolve the district.
It's dissolve the district. It says if...
Taxing district. I need to do a little more homework, I guess.
198.920.
Good job. Well, thank you. Dissolve the taxing district, which, back to your point, everything we do costs money to try and, my first thought is, okay, we'll carry the load. We'll figure out a way to do that. Well, we might end up in 2 or 3 years doing it for half the taxing districts if they can't put boards together. I'm a little sensitive to most people out there that volunteer, they are already volunteering, and then you have the families that they just want to get their electric bill paid and make sure their kids get to school on time. And so I don't have an answer, but I appreciate that we're having the discussion. It does go along with what we talked and the subjects earlier today with the taxing districts. I think the answer is a statewide legislation that would get us a small percentage of the taxing district funds coming back to the county. That's not a original idea from us, but it is. The assessors have certainly worked on that. As far as our responsibility in the legislative, the judiciary, and the executive, there's some things we can do and have to do. And again, it's like I said earlier today, every time we do make a tough decision, then we are subject to, okay, is that legal? Is that possible? Wait, all those things. So that's all I have, Mr. Chair. I don't have anything to really offer in building here, unfortunately, but I'll put some thought into it.
And I want to say the ORSs are very clear. If the public would like to look these up, again, Ms. Schmelzer referred to 198.920. And there are procedures, as Commissioner Gold said, which I'm not blind to those procedures. We have looked them up. 568.450 is a procedure for consolidating a district. 568.481 is initiating procedures for initiating a dissolution of a district, and then ORS 568491 is termination of boards in districts. So there are ways, and yes, there are laws that we have to follow to do this. Again, we're not trying to stomp out any district right now. We're trying to just bring this out to the public to let them know that it is a concern of mine that the districts in this county were formed for a reason. If they're not wanting to keep that district by not even being able to seat a board, then perhaps we need to look at dissolving the district and notifying that district that we're considering doing that if they don't seat a board within so many days. I don't know if that's the approach we should take, but that's an approach. But also there are districts that were formed that receive a tax base that maybe it's time to re-examine the amount of tax they get, because, again, I'm not picking on the library, but that taxing district has grown at a much faster rate than the rest of the county and some of the other districts. So perhaps they could take a small reduction in their amount of tax base that they get on an annual basis, and that money could go back to the sheriff's department, or forming something to solidify our law enforcement and protection for the citizens of this county, and just paying the general bills of the county. So those are just things that we're talking about here. Commissioner Gold?
Those are great ideas. I'm not discounting those ideas. But bottom line, if a tax district is dissolved, where does the money go that went to that district? It goes back to the taxpayers. Bottom line, if the tax rate is lowered in any of the districts, where does that money go? It goes back to the taxpayers, not to the county. So we have to go to the voters on all of these issues, really.
And I understand that, and I've been saying this over and over again for months. I've been saying I understand we have to go to the voters. All I'm trying to say is we can't go to the voters until we know what we're going to go to the voters with. And could we go to the voters with, yes, we'd like to reduce SWAC's tax rate, yes, and could it be identified as going to the sheriff's department to fund the sheriff's department? And a two-part question. I don't know the legalities of that, and that's why we employ a county council, to look at crossing the T's and dotting the I's before we make a move.
Okay, my question on that is, I don't think it's our purview to go to the voters to tell them, hey, we want to dissolve this district, and then, hey, the second part of this is we want that money to go to the county. I don't know that that's legal. I think they're going to have to do, their boards, they'll have to go to the voters and say, we want to lower the tax rate. That's part of it. Then the next part is, then the county goes to the voters and says, we want to up your tax rate, and then the logical reasoning would be, hey, it's lowered here, now we can ask you for more here.
We don't need a district to go to the voters and ask them to lower their tax rate. The board can go to the voters
Right,
with a measure,
exactly.
with a measure to lower that tax rate.
That's what I just said, or at least I thought I said.
In this particular case, this district that initiated this discussion, it's not a big revenue generating district. It's more of, the clerk's office is involved notifying legal and the Board of Commissioners office that they don't have enough members. JJ goes out, he puts out the ads, we take the applications, we do the appointments, it's just added steps, added work, added money for a district that doesn't, again, I hate to use the word care, but care enough to elect a board. So in those types of districts, should we exercise our right to dissolve them? If we legally can, and that's a question for council, of course, but do we want to pursue that? Do we want to continue this discussion after we have more information?
Commissioner Gold?
I would support that simply because we would be saving administrative fees. I wouldn't have a problem with that as long as the people in that district were notified ahead of time that this is what might happen.
So could we direct council to make sure that what we are talking about is completely legal in the state, and that the process we're going through to do that is the proper process before we move forward on that?
Let's give them a little time on that, right? Is that what you're recommending?
By lunch, you think?
Oh,
Well, if I could, I was looking at a different dissolution section. Apparently, there's more than one way to dissolve a district. The one I was looking at was if a district, for a period of 3 years, fails to perform their functions, which is collecting the money and distributing it, the DOR lets us know, and then we can go through a dissolution process. But the 198-920, it says that it may be initiated by a county, and it says if the district at the time of regular district election has not elected district board members. The district we're talking about, from what I understand, did elect the district board members. They've all just resigned, and then we can appoint them by seeking people. And we did that with the port of, I think, Brookings Harbor. They had either a recall or a resignation, and so we basically, canvassed for candidates and appointed some candidates, and we only had to appoint up to, a couple of members till they got a quorum, and then they went ahead and did their business. So I don't know that our ability to engage in the dissolution procedure that we're talking about here with the district we're talking about, who did elect their members, but their members resigned. I think the way I read this, it says if at the time of regular district election has not elected board members. So I don't think we could do this until they failed to elect people at the next election under 198-920. That being said, then we initiate a petition. It goes to them. They certify all their costs and things. But then we end up being the board of trustees for that district and doing all the work of that district to basically marshal the assets and distribute them. And then the question is, when I read down to 198-955, disposition of assets, it says that the funds shall be distributed to each taxing unit. It says in each year that the county receives surplus funds for the credit of the district, the funds in any account in excess of $6,000 retained by the county for administration shall be certified to the assessor and shall be disposed of as provided under the following paragraphs as selected by the county assessor, and then the assessor decides how to dispose them. They can be offset per a rule with the Department of Revenue, or they can be credited to each property appearing on the tax roll. So the assessor can give basically the taxpayers back the money that would have been done to that. So again, the biggest issue I see for us, Director Schmelzer was saying it's, administratively burdensome and costly for us to go through the process of appointing the replacements to the vacancies to keep the district operating. I think there's also a corresponding administrative burden to us to go through the dissolution procedure and act as a board of trustees where we're actually doing all the work of the district. So it's something the board can do, but you just want to look at the ins and outs, and then ultimately it says the assessor has the authority to choose how the money's distributed.
you glad you asked?
Mm-hmm.
Good.
So what I'd like to do is looking forward is to plan to look at all the districts in the county and the possibility of keeping them at what they're currently at and or consolidating some of the districts into one like gosh, I'm going to get emails for this too, but like the school districts, why can't we consolidate the school districts into one district with a superintendent and a principal for each school? There are ways to save the county money, and I know the voters have voted on this, and again, I know we'll have to go to the voters to make the changes, but it's time, I think, that the county looks at the tax distribution of the tax dollars. Everyone says, I don't want to raise taxes, but yet we have to do something to pay the bills of the county. I think it's time that we look at the property tax distribution of this county, how it's distributed, and possible changes and recommendations that we can make to the voters for them to vote on. So I would like to move forward with that, and I would just like its consensus from the board to at least do that, to continue to look forward on the districts and consolidation and or dissolution, or at least, again, looking at each district and what they receive, and either being consistent with that or making a change to it. Commissioner Boyce?
You have my support on the general direction that you just proposed there, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Commissioner Gold?
I know I'm a thorn in this side today, but we can make recommendations.
That's what we're doing.
That's fine. But demanding that things change, we can't do that.
If I may.
Commissioner
That's
Boyce?
Well, excuse me.
I'm sorry, were you finished?
I'm done. That's okay.
Commissioner Boyce?
So I just need clarification. Commissioner Gold's position is that we don't need to review this in any future date.
No, that's not my position.
Thank you. Can you clarify that? I want to make sure I understand what you're in opposition to.
No, my position is we can make recommendations to those districts, and then it's up to them and the voters to determine if they want to take those recommendations. It's not up to us to determine what they're going to do.
I don't think that's what you proposed, Mr. Chair, but maybe you could clarify the direction, consensus, as you put it,
Well,
like the board to go, so that we have some look at the future and where and how we might be able to address this whole agenda item again.
I think what I'm proposing is that we continue to look at the special districts in this county and the property tax distribution between those districts. And again, I want to use an analogy. Why do we buy a new computer? Because our old computer software is kind of worn out, or it's changed enough that it needs to be updated. It's the same with these districts. It's the same with everything in life. These districts were created for a great reason. It's like we make amendments to our Constitution because our life and the direction that this country is going has changed. These districts were created for a reason, and now some of these districts have grown to a point that they, in my opinion, are receiving some excess money that could be taken back into the tax distribution of the county and used more wisely. Again, will this have to go to the voters? Yes, it will, but I am asking this board to continue to look at the tax distribution of the districts in this county and either look to consolidate, to dissolve, and or at each district to make sure that they are performing as best tax dollars are spent.
I'm assuming then you, if I may?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm assuming then you are proposing a workshop with full public participation.
Yes.
That's all we need to know. Thank you. In my view, that's all we need to know.
Yes.
Do we have full board consensus on that?
I'm fine with that as long as we realize that it's just recommendations. We cannot dictate what the districts do.
I haven't heard the slightest proposal towards any kind of dictating.
Well,
So,
I'm kind of hearing fringes of that, so.
thank you, Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
thank you. That's all I have on it then. All right, so we're going to move on to credit card policy. Ms. Harvey, Finance Director. Good morning.
Good morning, Commission, Director Schmelzer and Council Huddle.
There you go.
Short people. So I'm going to be talking to you today about two opportunities, the first of which is a credit card policy. The objective of this one is to help the department heads in accomplishing their responsibilities for each of their departments by enabling them to be able to access the resources that they need through a fiscally prudent, consistent process that facilitates internal control and oversight for county purchasing. My first week here, I was asked to draft a policy for credit card policies for credit card purchases to help us have that be consistent between the departments. And this is the draft. In preparing this draft, I used other counties and the state policies as an example. I met with my staff internally, and then we presented it to your department heads and asked for feedback. Once we collected that feedback, we presented it to your Director of Operations, and then she okayed forwarding it on to our council. And then it was presented to council. There were modifications made along the way. So if you've seen it before, you'll notice today that it's a little bit different. It also has attached a draft procedure for the finance department of how we will process and oversight for us for managing those cards.
Okay.
So I just want to add that Earlier this year, the board did direct the finance office to come up with a credit card policy. And if you recall, the board said no more, can't issue any more credit cards until we have a policy in place. So right now we do have some areas that don't have credit cards. And I know, for example, in our office, we borrow Economic Development's credit card to make purchases.
And a lot of them are expiring this month, too.
Has the board read this policy that's in the package?
I would hope.
I've read it, and I don't have any problem with it at all. I think it's clear and concise. I also think that the direction you took on it is well thought. And again, I think it's up to a lot of the department heads to make sure that anyone under them, including us, anyone that is under us, is accountable for anything that they spend money on. And we should have to approve, per the policy, those purchases.
I want to mention that was a big point of the way that I developed this policy. It retains control with our elected officials and department heads, but it also developed a tool for a credit card agreement so that the individuals using the cards were held responsible for managing it and controlling it effectively, securing it.
So you need approval?
Pardon?
You need approval today. This is listed under an
Yes.
action item.
Yes.
So I'll move that we accept Finance Director Harvey's credit card policy as is in our packet.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold.
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Aye.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
All right, next we have
Thank you.
Did
New
you have
job.
something else?
Pardon?
Did you have a second item?
It's
Yes.
just that's what I'm calling out
I'm
right now.
sorry.
Next we have new job description and program office assistant, work experience, extra help, Charlene Harvey.
I'm really excited about this opportunity. So one of the things I noticed when I started here, because I wear two hats, finance director and human resource director, is that we are not able to fill positions in a county that is also not have a lot of opportunities for employment. And I was puzzled by that. We started looking at a lot of the applications that we were receiving. And many of the individuals applying just don't meet the minimum qualifications, and yet they're very personable. They're very intelligent individuals, and they just have either gaps in their work history or gaps in the skill sets of what would help them meet our minimum qualifications. So I started reaching out to our Veterans Employment Officers, to our SWAC Job Coordinator, our TANF representatives, and WorkSource Oregon, and we partnered together to discuss what they offer. And I came up with this idea for a new job description. If you notice, this one is transitional. It's a journey level position that allows individuals to work under a work experience program that costs the county $0 for up to 6 months. They got those skills in the departments that we need to fill positions in, and after that 6 months or before, if the person's working out and the department's budget allows, they can transition into a 50% paid position and 100% of workman's comp paid during the next training level. So we share those responsibilities while we're cultivating our local residents to meet county administrative needs. And then finally, there are departments who need positions filled but have losses in grant funding, or their budgets just don't allow for it at this time. But partnering in this kind of a position would allow us to meet those internal office needs while they develop relationships with the department heads and the people working in that office, as well as learning the individual dynamics of each office. So I talked to some of the department heads. There's some interest across the board. Two of the people that I've reached out to, I mentioned earlier, the veterans rep, Isaac Levi, is a veteran employer representative. He's regional. He comes quite a ways to travel. He came for a meeting. He's looking at doing workshops with us in the future. Melissa Hendrickson with WorkSource Oregon has already been partnering to have us send job descriptions to her so people can better fill out their applications to demonstrate their current skill sets, meet open positions. But the individuals that are here with us today is Ms. Corinne Gibson with Southwestern Community College. She's a jobs and careers coach. Her specialty, I've asked her to come and speak to you about, because she has a unique program. And then also our self-sufficiency branch of the Health and Human Services, Brian Hutchinson. Those will help us cultivate our local residents to meet the needs of the county's administrative needs within our current fiscal constraints. If you can allow me, I'd like to have Corinne come up and talk to you for a minute about her program.
Sure.
Thank you.
So with the JOBS program, basically what it does is it offers two variations to the program. We have Work Experience program, and then we have the JOBS Plus program. With Work Experience, we work with DHS, and they offer participants that have TANF and SNAP benefits that they're currently receiving, and we work to try to help them become self-sufficient. So with Work Experience, it's part-time employment. Basically, they act as if they're volunteers, and it's to gain on-the-job experience. This is for people that have had minimal job experience in a field, and they want to, break into that field, and they want to be employable. With Jobs Plus, it's the next step, and this is for people also that are on TANF SNAP benefits. And then this is somebody who is employable. Maybe they just still need a little bit more training in that particular field, or they just need their foot in the door, and allows them the opportunity to work for you, and they're considered a temp employee. How it works is the benefits, basically the workers' compensation benefits, the taxes, and up to minimum wage are reimbursed to the employer. This is for a 6-month program, and this is specifically with Jobs Plus. And while they're in this program, their SNAP and TANF benefits are put on hold, because the idea is to help make them employable and either obtain permanent employment with the employer that they're currently working for, or at least develop that resume, show some skills so that they can potentially have permanent employment after that. And this offers basically a hand-in-hand for both the employer and the participant to be able to work together and help each other grow so that they can both get something out of it. You achieve having somebody working for you. It helps budgetary-wise, and then it also helps these people become more employable and ultimately obtain permanent employment.
Okay. Commissioner Gold?
I'm just curious, how many individuals are enrolled in your program? I had a friend once that kind of taught these individuals. How many do you have right now?
It can vary. It's based on how many people DHS refers to us. Brian, do you have a number to throw at that?
Hi, Brian Hutchison here, Department of Human Services. I'm what's called engagement specialist. My job is to oversee the Welfare to Work program for Coos-Curry counties. So that's my charge. And with that is that currently between the two districts there's actually 409 households on TANF. Of that, here in Curry is about 130 households are on TANF, and out of that, then there are approximately 30 households that are required to participate in the jobs program, because most people don't realize that when participants receive TANF, they're actually required to engage in employment programs, because TANF is sourced from Social Security funds. And so there's a mandatory employment retraining program in TANF, and our job is self-sufficiency to get people that are receiving TANF to not need us anymore. And so we do that by placing people in unpaid and then subsidized paid positions. Yes, Commissioner Gold.
So this is just off the wall. What % of your people would you say that go into these work programs are successful and are able to move forward and be self-sufficient?
I would say our success rate there's actually a lot of varying levels, and Corinne and her program that we contract, they're a subcontractor for Coos-Curry, and that they are at the top end, so that we've filtered out people that aren't necessarily career ready, we don't refer them to them because we try to work with them. If they're at a lower level, if you've never held a job, well, we're not going to start you off, there, because you probably need some basics. And so we have life skills, we have lower levels, which is called supported work, to where they have job shadowing, job coaching, just like one-on-one all the time. So they build those skills so eventually they get to the point where we can refer them so they can work actively in a business or for any, for an entity and
So out of those top levels that say would be referred to us, what % are usually successful in becoming self-sufficient?
I would say that probably 50%. In talking about self-sufficiency is that not every time, it works, but that there are actually administrative penalties for not participating in the program, and that's the other part of my job is I administer the administrative penalty part of it. And so that when people don't participate that are mandatory, there's actually financial penalties and they can lead to grant closure. So that there are motivations to keep people
So are these
actively
folks
engaged.
mostly willing to do this, or are they recalcitrant?
Well, I will say this, and I'm a pretty firm believer that if poverty is a lack of income, getting people employed will cure that problem. And so that I believe, and our district here at DHS believes, that it's strong incentive to do that, and that people that are mandatory that don't participate then are put through the administrative penalty process and their grants are eventually closed. And so that...
So money talks is what you're saying?
Money does talk, imagine
Okay,
that.
got it.
All right. Thank you.
So I thank you for your time, Commission. I hope that you can see through this that this job description that's before you for your approval today is a tool in helping us to develop a work program that helps us jump on board with our community partners in cultivating our local workforce.
Do I have a motion? Oh, I'm sorry. Ms.
I
Melvin.
just want to add a few things. So I've been a supervisor in a different county that took advantage of these type of programs, and we had excellent employees, people that wanted to be there, they wanted to learn job skills. I can remember one that we brought on full-time, and they are still there, and they're very reliable, very hardworking. I think it's a great idea. We have $35,000 budgeted for scanning right now. That was going to go out to bids. I know from past experience, people, probably the best bidder is one that's out of Washington. This program would allow us to retain a lot of that money in-house and use people, local residents here to do that scanning in-house for us. We also have another one with a lot of paper documents that would these people could go through and learn those job skills. It's just a really great program to let the people be part of the county in which they're receiving these benefits. And it's something that I wish we would have taken advantage of a long time ago. We've had difficulty. Summer Madison, our economic development coordinator, has been responsible for putting together this secretary pool, where we advertise to get people in here to help out in the offices, and we've had a difficult time getting people to be in that pool. So this allows us the opportunity to have people ready for the pool, as well as save us money, especially since we're not paying for those the first 6 months of that salary. So it's a win-win all the way around. And Charlene, I have to thank you for following up on it and being as aggressive as you have been on it, because I think it's going to be a real plus to the county and hopefully get us some future employees.
Commissioner Boyce?
I just want to thank you both. You have something else?
Yeah, I just want to ask a little clarification.
Sure.
One advantage is that for the volunteers is that they are covered under the state workers' comp policy. You don't have to, that they're covered, so you don't, there's zero expense to them. And I will say in Coos, we place people in their parks department. the fairgrounds. In fact, fairgrounds here has used our work experience too. The recorder's office Aaron Coos has used. So you can, as you know, there's a lot of creative ways that you can utilize this. And then also in Jobs Plus, the employer is reimbursed for the wages and the workers' comp. So your net cost for that 6-month period, like I say, we reimburse the minimum wage for the first month. The second through the 6th month is $1 less than minimum wage. That dollar is then placed into an education account for the participant to access when they successfully complete it. So that's usually about $700. So just using simple math, that if you had a job for $12 an hour, starting in month 2, then we would reimburse at $10 an hour. We reimburse for the workers' comp, so that your net cost then for 4 months would be, for 5 months would be $5 an hour. So basically, your net cost for your employee would be $200 a week. That's pretty. I like that kind of math. So.
I have a question. Do you do a background check on the prospective employees?
No, but one thing we can do, if there's a fee associated with that, we can pay that.
Okay.
So as long with drug testing also, if there's any fees associated with them participating in the program, we can pay for that. We can do it at zero cost to the employer.
Thanks. Appreciate
And I
the info.
Remind you that it was also the Veterans Office in WorkSource Oregon who weren't able to be here today that we're also partnering with. So we're really maximizing tax dollars out there.
Commissioner Boyce, did you have something further?
Do you sense a little bit of enthusiasm in the air? And better late than never. I'm sorry, too, we didn't get this done 2 years ago. I really appreciate you both taking the time to come down here from Coos Bay. That's always a big deal for Curry County. We're down here in this frontier. Thank you, Director Smelzer, for your heads up and certainly your background in that. Ms. Harvey, really good work. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
We have a motion?
I
So
move that
moved.
we approve the job description and program for office assistant, work experience, extra help, as proposed by Ms. Harvey.
Second?
Second, Mr. Chair.
Further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold,
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce,
Yes.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, guys. Next, we are going to have 6K. Mr. Barnes? All right. This is the Harbor case, continued discussion. Dave Fortman? Morning, sir.
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, sir. Before I start the discussion, I just want to pay a compliment to the board. Your couple of workshops on code enforcement, including this one, has moved this issue forward
Good.
and moved our stakeholders, shareholders in these projects forward. So we're all starting to work and getting a resolution. On this particular matter, the property owner resolved their issues with Harbor Sanitation District on Thursday by paying their fees.
Great.
Harbor gave us a notification that they're set to move forward. On Monday, I met with the property owner here. He has completed the application for the building permit process. That was submitted and accepted by our building department. The only thing that is pending payment of fees that the building department has to figure out what they're going to do because of the complex nature of this. It's being monitored, and hopefully we'll have a resolution in the next week or two to this property.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Commissioner Boyce?
I'm going to have to add something to that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Fortman. I think I've made it clear that I don't know why we are not mentioning who this citizen is. His name is Richard Wise. Made it very clear during the last discussion that he's a friend of mine. I almost want to put him in the category of a good friend. I watch him very close. I've pushed him as hard as I can on this. I'm not trying to take any credit. But something really disturbs me, and that's the conduct of this board on the September 4th meeting, with the exception of County Council and CEO Fortman. I think that there's 3 questions that really need to be asked so we can tell the citizens that we do our homework. Number 1, this agenda item come through to the board without any supporting commissioner It came through without any supporting documents. Mr. Wise was not invited to this meeting, or to that meeting, excuse me. And I am appalled that we allowed that. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, with the exception of the people I just mentioned and myself, we were going to cut off electricity. We made some assumptions that were really under the category, in my view, of guilty until proven innocent. And I'm trying to separate out and have objectivity because he is a friend, but nonetheless he is a citizen. I've even had people tell me that he's not really a veteran. And that is absolutely false, because I've done my homework there too. And that, in its sense, in doing that proper research to understand what the citizen was up against. And so it's not over, Mr. Chair. He's going to come back. I'm not encouraging him that way. But if he wants to come back and show the documentation he has, to the extent he believes that the Harbor Sanitary Board members were misled, and I'll just give you one example. He made 6 different Harbor Sanitary meetings. So any notion that he was indifferent or irresponsible in his duty to get to those meetings, he's going to be able to prove in his public record that that's false. And again, that's just one thing. Don't need to carry on anymore, but I don't ever want this board to take a citizen like that and say, here, we don't even know what we're discussing. We think we're talking about one individual, and in the beginning of the meeting, we're keeping his name secret. And it's just really unacceptable to me. And so that's all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Fortman, I appreciate your diligence on this. And,
Yes, absolutely.
And the tact that you used in it as well. Thank you, sir. Did you have anything? All right, next we're moving on
Mr. Chair, wait a minute. Can we answer the question of who put it on the board, why Mr. Wise wasn't invited, and why there's no supporting document? Doesn't have to be today, Mr. Chair, but I want those 3 questions asked. I want to know how this all happened, because it took a route that was really unfortunate. Yes.
I can answer that question. So I put it on the board, or I'm sorry, on the agenda.
At whose request?
Harbor Sanitary had reached out to Commissioner Gold and just said they wanted to talk to us about code enforcement issues. It was put on there and no names were mentioned because my understanding is it was the general conversation when we have issues like this, what do we do? That conversation, at some point somebody mentioned a specific party, but my understanding was this was a general discussion on how do we proceed on these violations and have better code enforcement and coordination with Harbor Sands, especially when we have people that won't comply with Harbor Sands requests or county requests. At what point do we take the next action? The conversation obviously evolved during that whole meeting, but there was no intent to mention a specific party or discuss the specific case.
Well, it went way beyond awkward, so I don't know how much of a discussion you want to continue on with this, but maybe I will reverse what I said a moment ago. I would encourage him to come, and if he has documentation that shows that he did not get free sewer service for 2 years, that he did try and work with the county and do his responsibility, the ball is in his court, and right now he's very believable. Please don't lose fact of that we basically convicted him while he was here. That's my opinion. I think you go back and look at the tape. It's pretty hard to come away with any different conclusion.
All right.
Thank you.
Moving on to L, Housing Coordinator position, Ms. Schmelzer.
Yes, during our housing workshop, it was mentioned that there was a desire for a housing coordinator position. Commissioner Boyce has been pretty vocal as an advocate for a housing coordinator position. I did put together a job description for us to consider for a housing coordinator. I wrote it such that this person would serve the entire county, not just the unincorporated areas. They would also be helping the cities out as well. I would add, it's not in here, but the first step is to approve the job description, of course, and make sure we want to go forward with our engagement in the housing program. But I would also add that at the time, if this goes further, that we make it very clear that this be a grant-funded position that it's based on admin dollars from grants or contributions, but it not be a general fund employee.
That was my question, answered.
I have one also. If it's going to be for the entire county, can we expect support from the incorporated cities through maybe some of their admin fees for this?
So I have not talked to the cities about this because I wanted to make sure the county was even willing to extend that olive branch. I did put it a little heads up to the cities and the ports that I did want to discuss this at our next county leadership meeting that we have with the cities to see if they were interested as well. So starting with the county to say, do we want to pursue this? Do we want to have a housing coordinator? Do we want to pursue the grant funding for it? Is this something everybody supports? And do we support the idea of it not being a general fund employee? Just where do we go from here?
Okay. Mr. Barnes?
Good morning. Thank you again, David Barnes. I'm sorry, but I don't think this county belongs in the housing business. We currently have there's a Coos Curry Housing Authority, there's a homeless coalition, there's other housing authorities. Until we have a plan for a housing coordinator to implement, I think that we're being way premature in considering hiring one. We have no plans to do, to address the housing issue other than opening up road fund money to throw at it, I guess. I don't know. But, we don't have a plan. What are we going to hire a housing coordinator to do? Are we going to hire one to develop our plan for us first? We have other people sitting in the room who've been in housing in Curry County for many years. I'd like to hear their plan and what their vision would be before we would hire somebody new off the street to come in and to do this for us. I just think it's way premature. I don't think that Curry County belongs in the public housing industry. I think that's a huge mistake for us to make. And I just wanted to make my opinion known. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I attended last Friday the Wild Rivers Coast Alliance. It was basically a meeting with North Neighborhood Works, Umpqua. Orca had a representative. Certainly United Way was there. Former Commissioner Nallen was there. She may want to speak on this. Jim Seeley, who is the Bannon Dunes facilitator for Wild Rivers Coast Alliance, he must have said 3 times, Commissioner Boyce, thank you for being here. These people are ready to help us. They are partners. They are dedicated. They understand our problem. They want to pull everybody together. I'm with, first of all, this is a 5.5 page. The amount of time you put into this, it's very well stated. I think this protects the county. To get a plan, I couldn't agree more. This person, compensated outside of general fund dollars, will develop that plan. I have no intention of the county going into the property management business, but Neighborhood Works Umpqua, their primary focus goals are to find housing developments and facilitate, support, encourage, fund, and then they're property managers, so that's their job. They're willing to come down and help Curry County. I've encouraged Director Smelzer that I want this to be, at least right now, I've felt like we could have this as a county coordinated effort. But after leaving that meeting on Friday and seeing the amount of time and effort that's gone into that, I could certainly go either way. I just want to take advantage of the people that understand our problem and are willing to help. And boy, they're out there. So now's the time. I couldn't be more enthusiastic. This has been moving and transitioning into where we could really make a difference. And I think we can raise the funds, and I think we're responsible to do that. We've got, go back to the law enforcement, the schools, and the medical care. There was one other, I always forget the fourth one, that we're trying to help bring professional employees into this area, and they need help finding housing. I mean, the sheriff's got examples. Yeah, anyway, maybe you could fill in the blank there.
Well, there's a couple things. You know, we've thrown around the idea of partnering with the schools and the hospital to have housing. You know, basically, as you said, we'll get people interested in working for us. They're very talented people, but there's no housing. I myself couch surfed, thanks to my friends, for the first 2 months I was here. We have people living in campers. We have people that just can't take the jobs because they just can't find the housing. So there's been discussion about that. I think you're aware of my goal of hopefully being able to replace all those very old, dilapidated campers that families are living in and get them into stable housing through a grant program or revolving loan fund program. I know with our housing authority right now, at the current time, they're not doing development projects. I've actually reached out to Jackson County Housing to see if they would help us develop some housing projects. They were willing to help as long as we had the property for them. I mean, we've got people out there. We've got the programs. We've got the need. There's only so much your current staff can do. You know, I can't run a housing program right now under my current
Good if you had the time.
workload. If I had the time, but I don't have the
No way.
time. It's just something that, you know, there's been studies for. All Care has paid for a study. The City of Gold Beach had a study. I think there's enough information out there and data to support the fact that we have a problem. We did an emergency housing declaration that says we recognize that there's a problem. Let's not just talk, let's do, is kind of my attitude on it. And however, I am very concerned about tax dollars, and I think if we can have a position that does not come out of the general fund, I think we should pursue it. But if this is something where we don't have funding from outside sources, I don't think we should pursue it at that point. I think if people really genuinely care, they're going to help support it. And if they don't, I guess the message is pretty clear that they're not as enthused about solving the housing crisis as they think, as we've heard.
Commissioner Gold?
I know other counties have housing problems, as we do. How many other counties, or are you aware of any counties that have housing coordinators to do this specific function? Just curious.
I don't have an inventory on that. I do know when I was in Josephine County, I was part of a work group that had discussed having a countywide housing coordinator. By the time I left, what we did was we took $75,000 of lottery dollars that we put towards a large housing project that was occurring there. So there wasn't money to have a housing coordinator. I don't know if they ever pursued it after I left. There are several areas, you know, each area is different. Sometimes you'll have CAP agencies that run housing programs. We're not under the auspices of, we're not capped. We're not part of a CAP agency. You have a lot of, as Mr. Barnes said, there's a lot of different groups out there working on housing, but they're all doing their little piece of the puzzle, you know, either giving vouchers or helping the homeless, and there's no big umbrella looking at all of those housing issues, such as veterans housing, home repair. We just don't have that master umbrella right now in Curry County.
Yeah, and I guess my main concern is how effective would this housing coordinator be? I don't know. Maybe Mrs. Nowlin can put forth some information on that.
Georgia Nowlin Brookings. Yes, Commissioner Boyce, thank you for being at that summit on Friday. It was a summit meeting of NeighborWorks, Umpqua, United Way, and the Curry Housing Task Force. Our Rob Foster, our coordinator for that, was there as well. And we are looking at a systems approach, regional approach. It has to be at that level to really be comprehensive in addressing the housing issues, because they are complex. You're talking several areas: subsidized housing, the homeless, affordable housing, workforce housing. Those are all different areas of housing and rentals. So NeighborWorks Umpqua we were looking for funding to support a larger funding package from Meyer Memorial for work on the coast. I'm not going to speak to it yet from the standpoint of we are still waiting for final approval from Meyer Memorial, but with NeighborWorks UMQA, I can speak a little bit to that. They are looking to have a collective impact person as well as a development person to pull together a lot of the projects, very much like the housing coordinator for that, for Coos and Curry counties. So we're talking a large regional, and it has to be, if we're talking about projects like like we talked about with the community land trust concept, we're talking about small parcels. How do you bring in a builder to come in and do that? So it has to be economies of scale. It has to be a consistent pipeline of this, working within the 2 counties at least. So these are concepts that are out there. I think it's a little premature to be looking for a housing coordinator for the county at this time, especially when it has to be more of a systematic approach to solving these issues. And if you're lone wolfing it, so to speak, from just that, the grant funding would be an issue as well, because funders are looking at collaboration. They're looking at who are the partners. They're looking at how can we all work together on this. So I would probably say is let's see where this goes forward. I know Summer sits on the core team for the Curry Housing Task Force as well, so you have a county representative. And it's important that we all talk. We welcome what the county's trying to do with it, because we all have to be participating to do this. So thank you.
Commissioner Boyce?
Ms. Nallen, thank you very much. Walking out of the Capitol, David Brock-Smith yesterday, and talking about the Siskiyou Regional Fire Training Center, he says by the way, we are on the next agenda, and I didn't have to ask, and that'll be the 26th in Portland. I can do it by phone and by document sent to them. So that is very good news, just confirmed this morning. But as we're walking out of the Capitol, he says, we need a fire training center, no question. We need firefighters, no question. We need hotshot crews, no question. But to your point, Ms. Nallen, he's reminding me, and he says, thank goodness Curry County can take the lead. And I'll say, what are the other counties doing? How effective are we going to be? Are we going to take the lead? In taking that lead, we pull these partners together. And he said, the work we've done with the Forest Service, back to the Fire Training Center, the work we've done with the other counties, the BLM, certainly the Oregon Department of Forestry, the forest collaboratives, we may want to go on our own, but we're not going to get the funding. If we pull these people in with the needs we have in this county through just sheer determination and proper homework, they will come on board, and they are. That was Representative Brock-Smith's point. Ditto with the housing thing. Would I like to have one person separate and responsible to the commission, board, and Director Smelzer? And we still may do that. I just don't know if that's the best way to go, and if that's our best chance at getting the funding we need, again, outside the general fund. That's also part of my commissioner report today, so I'd like to go first, if I may. Even the head of director, I've got to go to Brookings and get there before noon. So when this subject is closed, I'd like to give just 2 or 3 minutes, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so, you know, my 2 cents on this is I don't know that we need a housing coordinator, and I'm not sure that it's dollars best spent, but I will say this. I think it is definitely worth looking into. So going to Ms. Schmelzer's point, I think that we should at least look into whether we want one and how to fund it. And I'd also like to have the conversation, like you said, at the next meeting, managers meeting, or the county meeting, to see if we can get the cities involved in this as well, not only through grant funding through the county, but also get city contributions through maybe their admin fees and some dollars that they have to help pay for this, so that we don't have another burden to the general fund of the county. Yeah. So I would like to move it forward, at least to look at and see if we can get the incorporated cities on board and see where it leads us.
I'll have to agree with Commissioner Pash on his comments. So I'll just say ditto. How's that?
Do we need a formal vote on this then, or?
No, I'll just continue to work on it. And I just have one thing to add. Commissioner Gold, one thing glaring in my mind, which when you asked me if other counties have done this, I don't know about Oregon, the numbers, but I do know from my own experience back in Wisconsin, I actually worked for a county that had a housing coordinator. And what we did was we actually ran it as a revolving loan fund program. So there were some grants, there was also some loans, but as that money came back, it helped pay for the services. So there's different ways of doing it. I'll just continue to look into it for the board, talk to the cities, and I'll bring it back for further discussion.
Okay.
Great, sounds good.
Thank you for the work you did on
Yes, great work.
this 5.5 pages of job description. That more enthusiasm.
So are we okay to let Commissioner Boyce go first here?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Board. Back to housing, sudden oak death. Those are the two biggest issues, in my opinion, that this county is faced with. I've got very well acquainted with Greg Wolf and the Association of Oregon Counties, also through my board membership there. And I'm going to meet with him again on Thursday, late Thursday, or Friday morning, I don't remember now which, but he is the lead person with the Association of Oregon Counties on facilitating sudden oak death, where we're going to spend this 1.7 that we got from the state, and of course, in addition, aggressive ask from the federal government to understand how serious this disease is and how critical, Mr. Chair, it is that we keep it in Curry County. And it goes along, too, with the Governor's Fire Recovery Council. I spent all day Monday. That was time well spent. I don't have time to give a report today. As you know, we're not going to make the Governor's request of getting it done by the end of this month, but we will have it done probably in the second week, hopefully, of October. So back to Greg Wolf. He also is the lead person for the Governor through AOC on the Housing Commission for the state of Oregon. So there's some tremendous resources there that are available to us. As you said, you and I don't have time to pursue those resources other than bring the right attention to Curry County. I believe a housing coordinator, Mr. Chair, could really help fill that role. And there is, again, other than just funds, we just have to compete. Everybody knows our story. We have tremendous opportunities in this county. We have tremendous challenges. Moving on, in my time with Senator Hurd and Representative Brock Smith, we're already looking at new projects. Could be the short session. I'm not real optimistic about that. The funds that would come back to Curry County is probably more likely to be the 2021 full session, or maybe even down the road. But right now, our next consideration is for the Port of Brookings. With the 1.6 that went to the Port of Port Orford, the 1.7 for SOD, the $2 million. There's some hiccups on the $2 million for the South Coast Emergency Room, but those are getting worked out in between the Governor's office. You may have a report there. And then the sediment study, we've talked about spending time in the Port of Brookings, having some of those funds go to the Port of Brookings in the study, and we may want to include Pistol River on that because the Pistol River watershed drainage, of course, was also tremendously damaged by the Checo Bar fire. The one thing I want to communicate to the citizens here, a week ago Monday we had the Water Resources Director in, Tom Pryor. He made a presentation to the AOC board. He gave us, and I'll try and get that to Staff Jesuit, he gave us a 100-year water vision for Oregon. As you all know or should know, water is going to become a bigger and bigger issue in our state, needless to say. And so in that vision, it has a different approach between metropolitan or urban and rural areas. What I want the citizens to know is we lost one of our water masters, and that was in Coquille, that is, less than an hour from Port Orford, 2 hours, less than 2 hours to Brookings. And so we had with State Representative Kathy McEwen and David Brock Smith yesterday. David Brock Smith basically summoned him to the office, said, why are we losing our one representative? And his report satisfied me that our citizens are going to be pretty well served. I just want the citizens to understand, I'm repeating this because I hope they recognize how important water rights are, and it takes a long time to get those corrected. So you're going to be dealing with a representative in Josephine County and representative from downtown Roseburg or Douglas County. So for Port Orford, our citizens there, they're going to be calling, and it's going to be 3 hours each way. For Gold Beach, it's going to be 2.5 hours from Josephine County. I'm convinced, at least we're going to be watching very close, that those water masters, it's not like the Water Resources Department is short of staff, but they have a greater need, go figure, in the Salem area, in the metropolitan area. So our citizens out there need to get acquainted with their water master if they have water projects, if they have water issues, and understand what the long-term vision is for our state and how critical water is. I could go on and on. I think that's enough, and I will be giving you additional reports on that down the road. I really appreciate the two state representatives that took the time to look out for our county and help me on that, and I'll make sure those reports are on the county website. That's all I have for now, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
All right. Don't speed on the way to Brookings.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rude, but I'm going to go welcome the Oregon State Parks Commission, and I'm very honored to do that.
All right. Director Schmelzer?
Okay, just a couple things to update you on. The first is the transit lodging tax and the business license program. As you know, Miranda Plaguey is our staff person who is responsible for that. She has reached out to as many transient lodging companies as she could find to notify them of the new ordinance. She's done some general searches. She's contacted property management offices, partnered with neighboring counties for third-party intermediary contacts, and she's also done some ads in the local papers. She's heard from VRBO and Airbnb now. Took Airbnb a little while to get back to us, but working with them basically to educate them and share with them the fact that we now have the TLT program in place. We'll start collecting, people will start collecting that tax come October 1st. So right now the program became effective September 1st, but they don't start collecting until October 1st. She's also done a lot of work on the business license program. That one has been a little bit easier to get a hold of the people and let people be aware that license is going to be implemented. She was able to work with the state, and the state actually had a business directory. So she has right now on the list of businesses that she'll be approaching, about 300 people right now would be contacted by U.S. mail, to try and get that database and get those people informed of what has that business license program. Finance Director Harvey has brought to my attention some concerns about the copiers and our copier contracts. In 2016, we spent about $10,000 on printers and copiers, I should say, and by 2018, that increased to a little over $25,000. So $10,000 to $25,000 in 2 years was a bit alarming. So she's looking into that to see how we can work on those contracts and streamline that and get those costs down on that as well. She's also done a little research into, the bills and things of that nature. She did find a big one that had not been paid, so we're working on, Cena's actually working with her on taking part of that, paying part of the bill this year and kind of offsetting to the next year how we're going to pay that bill. But it is being addressed, and I'm grateful she found that so we can stay on top of that in the future. We had some concerns about space needs. At the last minute, we talked about working with a private party who was willing to perhaps build us an office that we could use for a justice center or something of that nature. I put that on hold because the office that had the immediate need has made some arrangements with another office. They're basically swapping office space to meet some of those needs right now to get us by. So I've just kind of put all of that on hold, hoping, of course, that we can address the greater issue of space needs this spring as we pursue discussions on rebuilding a courthouse. Just some meetings coming up that I have to remind you of. We're beginning our natural hazard mitigation plan. That is something that is required, especially if we want to continue to get funding for hazards in the county. That planning process will have their kickoff meeting on September 26th at 1 o'clock at the Brookings EOC. Our emergency management director is also doing an emergency preparedness expo. That's October 12th. from 9:30 to 3:30 at Dosha Suite. And then with our parks coordinator, as you know, we've been looking into the Elk River properties for future campground. He's having a meeting with the public at the Port Orford Library on October 3rd from 5:30 to 7. Our next meeting, of course, for the board is going to be a little interesting. Normally, we would start our next meeting, which would be the 25th at 9 a.m. However, that's also the day that we're going to be meeting in Port Orford, so we're having our meeting in the evening. However, we are going to have a special session at noon, which will include an executive session and then some juvenile updates that they've been trying to get in front of us for. October, we do have, our finance director is going to be giving us our quarterly report, and we do have a budget meeting, quarterly budget meeting scheduled for November. I actually spoke with one of the budget members today. We're going to see if we can push that up a little bit, perhaps to October, to accommodate some schedules. But I'll work with the finance director on that. Other than that, that's all I have right now.
Okay. Well, I don't have a lot. I just want to say that I am moving forward with some questions that I had for the emergency room in Brookings, that we spoke about at the last meeting. I understand Commissioner Boyce just said there may be a hiccup. I think he may, I don't want to speak for him, but what I've learned is that this was put into the budget for 2021 for payment, but it was approved through the general fund. So they may be able to expedite, or they may have to expedite that money because it was approved through the general fund, not through the way that it's currently listed. So I've asked Representative Smith to look into a couple of questions I had on that, and also learning more about the processes that we've spoken about today through special districts, and talking to state representatives and also state legal counsel. Just make sure that the more information that we have on this, I'd rather be prepared for it. I just want to reiterate to the constituents one more time, I'm not here to be an adversary to any district. I am here to look at it all and hopefully find the best uses for our tax dollars. And that's all I have for today. Commissioner Gold.
Just to keep the public aware that SWOC is doing a number of seminars and this is kind of a groundswell from the public to utilize the SWOC campus more, and they have ongoing seminars going on every week. I attended one last week. There were 21 individuals there. We do a survey at the end to see evaluation form, and so far we've had positive reports. So there's a variety of classes. There's a lot of people, individuals, involved in the planning of this. So it's also going to be on the county website. I talked to Summer about that because I think we need to encourage people to use the campus. So, and there's some positive things going on there, and a possible art show there that would be fine art, not just crafts. So I thought that would be a good place to highlight that. So we're looking into that. And that's all I've got today.
All right. So at this time, we are going to recess our public meeting, and we are going to go into executive session per ORS 192.6602 to consider the employment of a public officer, employee, or staff member, and individual agent, and ORS 192.6602F to consider information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection, and H to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. So we're going to take about 5 minutes, and then we will enter executive session. We are in recess. Proceed as directed, and we are going to recess for lunch, and we will be back in at 1 p.m. This meeting is in recess. It is 1 o'clock on September 18th, 2019. Moving forward with our meeting would be a hire order for maintenance and construction worker Richard Christensen. And he's not here now, so do we need to have a... Okay, do I have a motion?
So I move that we approve the hire order for the maintenance and construction worker 1 for the road department.
And I'll second that. Any further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold,
Aye.
Chair Pash,
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce, absent. Motion carried 2-0.
Okay, second, 10B would be Assistant Facilities Director, Mr. Eric Hansen.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, Council, Julie. How can I help you?
Well, we understand that you have a hire order that I have never seen, firstly, and I don't know anything about the person. I don't even know his name or anything about that person. And I'm not understanding that, firstly. And secondly, I'm thinking Council Huddle might want to have some comments on our discussion earlier. Do we need to make comments on that or no?
Well, if I could, there were a couple of things we talked about earlier, but one of which was some emails where Julie Schmelzer communicated to several people, me being one, that the board, she had indications from at least 2 board members that they wanted to actually interview the individual who's being considered for hiring. And I think my only response was the board can do that, and if they do it, they should go into executive session on it unless the individual requests a public interview. And so I, wasn't really sure what was going to happen after that until I saw this matter on the agenda for an action. So, and then we did go in executive session on the background of this person, the actual individual, and we should not be discussing the, back and forth of the individual. It seemed like your questions, Mr. Chair, were mainly process related of how did the board not get a interview with the individual in question. If I understand correctly, you kind of asked me to talk, so that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think what's happened is, we have a process in place here that we have to go by, that this board has put in place, RE through Ms. Schmelzer, and from what I've seen in email chains that I wasn't part of, there were requests to bring this to the board, and I understand Commissioner Gold was brought in on this, but there were, I believe, other requests to have the entire board notified of this, and they were not followed up with, so it was pause for concern for me.
I was simply following established hiring policies of Curry County as outlined.
Well, that's from me.
Yes, this is a letter. Council answered my questions. Regardless, under our procedures, the BOC makes all hiring and firing procedures. They must make their hiring decisions in open session. I don't know what Eric's job description is or whether he is a department head. I am the facilities director, which is a department head, and therefore an appointing authority who makes recommendations to the BOC on hiring. Usually the department head does the interviews and makes the recommendation by a proposed hire order, which I have done. Then a conditional offer is made, which Julie has done. We do a criminal background check and then consider that info in exec session as you have done this morning. Then do a hire order at the end of the next meeting if background is okay by the BOC. I prefer we do not engage in any public processes on any job applicant until after a conditional offer is made. Thank you, John. And we have reviewed all of the criminal background check with the BOC in exec session. But doing a public interview before any preliminary offer letter goes out to a subject to criminal background screening is not our usual process. I believe I have followed this direction entirely, and they are established county hiring practices, which we have utilized in the past many times. This is not a director position. This is an assistant. It says so in the title that you helped create.
Ms. Schmelzer?
The way the job description is written, it says that it's going to be a department head. So the board wanted. The concern on this one was because the job description says it's going to be a department head, the board wanted to have some say on who gets hired for that position because they're ultimately the department head when you leave, Eric.
Yes.
So, and we haven't had, that I'm aware of, we haven't had an assistant position, so this was new ground for us.
We have many assistants in place right now as we speak. In the job description, it says may become facilities director. We do not know that. This is on a probationary 90-day basis, so we can't decide at this point if this individual is even capable of assuming a directorship.
Counsel?
So I guess as far as I'm tracking this, the big hitch here is in this particular job position, job description says may become director, et cetera. It's kind of just comparing it to, for instance, right as soon as we came out, we made a hire order on a road worker that was done by the board, and we did the background screening and all that stuff. But that the board didn't interview. But another part of the equation is, I think, again, I saw that email, that refreshed my recollection. I think earlier along the line, I sent out an email saying that, again, the board can interview, but they have to do it in exec session. A question, I guess, for Director of Operations, if you knew from 2 members of the board that the board wanted to interview this person, why didn't you just make an executive session to interview this person and put it on the agenda?
I wasn't scheduling the interviews, and I wouldn't schedule the interviews.
For the Board of Commissioners, even if they asked you to do that?
They asked to be included on the interview, so I let the director, HR coordinator, and yourself know that they wanted to be included on the interview.
Sure.
So that when the interviews were scheduled, the board could be invited.
Okay, well, I mean, if it's board action at a meeting, I thought you prepared all the agendas.
Let me ask this then. How was Commissioner Gold? How were you invited in on this?
Via email, as his liaison. That's
the liaison.
Okay.
Yes, normally we request the liaison commissioner.
I understand that. I understand the process, Mr. Hanson.
But I think, we're still, this one, it had some particular elements to the job description. Number 2, we have, again, different parties playing different roles in the process. If it's a board action, again, for me, I would think that anything going to the board would be gone through the Director of Operations. If the board were to interview someone as a board, it would have to be a public meeting and an executive session with all that procedure that goes along with that. So the board can't get together and consider an item outside of, those parameters. And therefore, in my mind, it would have happened in exec session at a board meeting, which at least Director Schmelzer could have had some input on. But in the meantime,
for one reason or another,
Yeah.
we don't need to sit here and point fingers.
No,
but,
for
one reason or another, it failed to happen, and we would have liked to have seen it happen. On top of that, there's other things now that we have to discuss with this that we've discussed in executive session. So to move forward with this is a vote, I guess, for Commissioner Gold and I to make because Commissioner Boyce isn't here. Through learning what we know now, do we move forward or not? I would make a motion that we do not move forward with the hire of this person. Do I have a second?
I'm going to have to second that because of what was discussed in executive session, so.
Any further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold.
Aye.
Commissioner Chair Pash.
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce, absent. Motion carried 2-0.
Okay, we'll send out the pre-action letter.
All right, at this time, our meeting is complete. Unless there's anything further, we are adjourned.